We're going to move into a space for questions and answers. And if we can perhaps, can we go to the loop slides and have those playing in the background for the questions and answers? We try very hard to make our loop slides somewhat humorous because we know that this conversation can be difficult. So if you need some humor or some joy, you can just watch what's going on behind us. So we have a microphone in the center. We invite you to, do we have a handheld? Yes, please. Do we have a volunteer to pass the handheld around?
Someone to work the floor. Here comes Mr. David.
If you'd like to come up here, or if you would like the handheld to be passed to you.
So I guess I have a rather specific practical question about this, and I'm going to give an example from another area of my life. I'm on the board of a labor union, and we get accused by our own members of being kind of like in bed with the Democratic Party. Now, the labor union endorses candidates that are supportive of labor, which occasionally is a Republican candidate, like every couple of years, usually not because of the values of the party. So this is going to happen if the other side does not really support the values that we're looking for. And I'm not understanding how you're supposed to separate those two things. Like, it's not a blind faith to a party, it's issue-based in a lot of cases.
Right. Certainly. And of course, churches, do risk losing their tax-exempt status if they're too partisan, right? I was a member of IBEW, Local 24 Baltimore, for about 15 years. And obviously, there are times when our most pressing values and the issues where we believe that beloved community is most effectively built may be championed more by one party or another. That's fine. And of course, it can appear to people who don't understand the distinction. If I'm speaking about certain values and certain public policy priorities that we feel are necessary for building the beloved community, it can seem like we're being partisan. Right? So this is not easy, right? But the important thing is two things. Let's get rid of the groupthink and assume that everyone that comes in our churches is of a certain party. This is more a sort of one-on-one thing, because I'm not going to stop talking about social justice or where I think this country should go, but especially the religious professionals have to be very careful about how we build our communities so we make it clear that folks who may not agree with us are still welcome and they're getting the spiritual sanctuary they need. Is that clear? David.
I'm Paul Dresner. I'm the treasurer of this congregation. I wasn't at the last GA, but one of the issues that was brought to my attention was the fact that they voted to divest in fossil fuels. Our congregation is quite well endowed, and we get our money from royalty rights from natural gas, primarily, which is a fossil fuel. And one of our members questioned the UUA, well, how can you be divesting and taking money from us? And they said, well, that's okay. I'm concerned, regardless of what I understand one's environmental concern. I think if I were the one waving the magic wand, I might say we're all for a clean environment, and let's find ways of making whatever fuel sources we're using more environmentally friendly. But to take a position like that, when probably 99% of the people there got there by car, train, or bus, they all heat their homes, they all eat food that has been using fertilizer and things, all from fossil fuel. That is kind of a hypocritical thing. So, and yet we are having a democratically run General Assembly, so this was a vote. And the politic there was in favor of that. I agree entirely with what you're saying with regard to separating our religious life and our political or other concerns. So how do you, and I'm concerned with the growth of the denomination, which this affects. So my question is how, if people have the free right to vote their consciences, and they're voting in this way, which is self-defeating in my opinion, because they're more of a, how do you make a shift there?
That's a great question, and it's one that I've had in conversation with members of our congregation in Sterling, because one of our our great lay leaders is an employee of Exxon. And when the divestment was proposed and then voted on, he felt a whole lot of pain. And he's someone that has not only supported our congregation, but also supported the UUA and gives a fair amount to support their work. And he said, you know, I don't know if I can keep contributing if this is done in this way. The conversation that we've had has hinged on the issue of complexity. And that so often we want to take a stand, and if you're going to take a stand, sometimes it needs to be simple. Think about political rhetoric. Think how simple it is. We're for hope. We're for change. We're for, it's very, very simple, and you cannot boil down these complex issues into simple statements or simple actions that that recognize the complexity inherent at the core. So the conversation that I've had with this member is that sometimes I feel called as a minister to take a stand, because otherwise I feel completely inactive and like I'm not doing anything. But sometimes we can take a stand that still recognizes the complexity, I think, better than that stand did. Now, one of the tricky things is that what they did do with the divestment is they maintained a relationship with the companies. And that isn't spoken about when you're getting a quick tidbit of what's been done. They maintained a relationship, so they didn't divest completely. They have to be stockholders to be able to be in that relationship. And I think that that is where the real transformation can happen. The real transformation isn't happening in that we're divesting. Great, I still took a plane to get to GA. I didn't accomplish much. The real transformation happens in those stockholder meetings where we stand up and say, we recognize these things that you are doing that are good, and we recognize these things that you are doing that are harmful. So can we talk about that? So it's only in staying in relationship that we deal with the real complexities of change.
Hi, thank you. I think Karina with the Freeport congregation. I don't know if there's a question or a comment, but I remember after September 11th, when the war broke out, that there really wasn't, there was a lot of conversation about being against the war, but there wasn't a feeling of a safe place to talk about it before the war, because we just weren't talking about that. So I love the idea of the Republican and the Democrats, but it's also general. The story about the abortion was really important. We had a young Catholic man come into our youth group and talk about his right to life and how he's against abortion, just to open up our kids' eyes and have that conversation. So I think if there's a crisis and something that happens, to always keep in mind that there's other people who might feel intimidated to come through and talk.
Complexity is so important. And so, for instance, my congregation has a very clear system of how they propose a statement of conscience. And so when they really want me to stand forth in representation of them, we go through that process. And at the end of it, all voices have been heard, and the vote is the vote, and people feel like they've been heard. Too often we just assume that we're on this side or another side of an issue, and we move forward. And one of the most damaging things that happened during the aftermath of September 11th and the onset of the Iraq War, which I opposed and marched against, well, there were people, some of our minister colleagues, who made the claim that they were going to have to leave the country and they were going to renounce their American citizenship. Not one of them I know who said that actually did that. So that's dangerous.
Since I saw you, I was so thrilled to see you at GA. I've had this confusion that I haven't been able to rectify. Outside the congregation, I feel that I am not welcome to express my point of view, which is rather liberal. I am shut down, and just what we're talking about we do to others here, I found done to me. So while I value learning open-mindedly, I also value a shared reality. And I love to come here and be able to talk to my friends, to get refueled and to get inspired, re-inspired, and to get, you know, some kind of help to deal with some of the people who don't listen to me. So I don't want to shut other people out, but I need a space to be able to learn, you know, and to help and to share reality with people. And this is my space.
I think that's a wonderful perspective, and I think we do need those spaces. And one of the things that I recognize that I'm going to talk more about in the workshop, if you come and join me for the workshop that continues on this theme, is how if we don't have those spaces in our lives, then we can't do the hard work in other places in our lives. And the question is, how do you have a congregation that serves both of those needs for you, for all of us individually? And I think that that's quite possible. You have different relationships with different people in the congregation, and it's just being aware of who's in the room and who you're talking to, and creating that space in your conversations when you don't know the people you're talking with, to give them the opportunity to share fully themselves before the assumptions are made.
Hello, I'm Ann Corsini from Fourth Youth in New York City, and I'd like to go to a very serious thought which occurred to me when you were speaking about being saved. It scares me, because when one is being saved, it implies that there's a judge. And I'm a recovering Catholic, and I left the Catholic Church because I did not want to be saved by, or I did not want to be saved by their beliefs. I do not want to be saved by anyone. And I would like to ask, what do you mean when you say we're saved if we do the right thing?
You know, I honor your desire to and your perspective on theology, but you know, we said we're saved by connection and commitment. We're saved by communities of challenge, and you know, we all hear words differently. But I think it remains my view that we are all in need of salvation, and that's just another word for wholeness.
Yeah, it's a tricky word. One of the things that we do in both of our congregations is we preach on the tricky words all the time, like salvation and faith, reverence, all these words that the culture in general has taken and given a meaning to, but we can recreate other meanings, and that's one of the things that we try and do with words like saved. That we're not talking about a spiritual being reaching down and fixing us. We are not. Other people might feel that way, and that's wonderful. We're talking about what community does for us, what connection does for us, what all these things that we can experience in a beloved community can do for us.
One more, I think we got lunch.
Hi, I kind of see a dilemma in what you said when you said that this minister from the AME church said that we won't join if it's run by a UU minister. But we're always in the forefront, it seems, of social movements as a religious community. So how do we solve this dilemma if we're going to stay in the forefront of social change movements?
That's a great question. Obviously, there are going to be certain issues at certain times when we may be the only religious voice that's pushing forward for that kind of justice. I think that's less and less so as we go forward, whether it's Reform Judaism or the Metropolitan Christian Church or some of the other folks who are on the cutting edge of building the beloved community. But there are other issues. This issue of immigration was really not cutting edge. It was in their face. It's something that we've been trying to solve since the last immigration bill in the 1980s. And when something really ugly erupted and Reverend Nancy responded, she wasn't able to get anybody's attention until she stepped back and let the mainstream folks in those communities take the lead. Now, this is something that many of our churches don't understand, because some of our churches, I would assume Shelter Rock's one of them, Tulsa in Oklahoma is one of them, also is Tulsa, also is New York, also is DC. They are the mainstream of their communities, and yet because of that, they're already seen that way, they can step forward. But in Prince William County, Virginia, even though their church is on Church and Main Street, it couldn't be more in the center of town, they were seen as the fringe, and they were not being listened to. And so it really is congregation by congregation, issue by issue.
But that's the basic tenet of community organizing. When do you lead? When do you fall back?
That's right. That's right. What's a winnable issue? When should you put your energy behind it? And who should be your public faces? Leadership. That's right.